It's not even true to say that I think you need to get rid of the Jesus story, or even not. I don't even think there's something problematic with orienting your life around the Jesus story. I think that can be reclaimed. But so, for instance, I was walking yesterday in this fine city of yours and saw someone on the sidewalk giving tarot readings to people. He had a tarot deck spread out. He had a few cards spread out, and he was soliciting people. And I'm sorry to say I didn't sit for a reading, but tarot cards, if you're familiar with them, are the quintessential artifact of New Age woo, right? I mean, these are not thought of as legitimate tools of divination, except by people who think that they're legitimate tools of divination. And yet, a tarot reading can be truly powerful, right? I mean, this is built on something, right? This is not just a massive example of self-deception on the part of people reading and people getting their cards read. These cards can seem prescient. I could give you all a reading right now, and 95% of you would find what the cards would say to be relevant to your lives. I mean, I could do it with an imaginary deck. I mean, an invisible imaginary deck. I don't know anything about tarot cards, but I'm going to turn over two cards now. One is the sun, and the other is the fallen man. Now, I know so little about tarot that I'm not even sure the fallen man is a tarot card. Right? Or I think it was the hanged man as a tarot card, right? Man, yeah. Okay, so I've got these two cards, and the sun is clearly the representation of wisdom, right? And the hanged man is the representation of lost opportunity. And I can tell you with some degree of certainty that all of you are at a crossroads in your life, right? Where you have good reason to believe that you're not making the most of your opportunities, right? Now, I could go on like this for an hour, right? And pretend all the while that it has something to do with the cards actually working in concert with the dynamics of the cosmos, such that these cards that I turn over, were they real, would be the ones that of necessity were revealing something about your mind in this moment. And obviously people think in these terms about astrology and sympathetic magic and all the rest, and religion is built upon this kind of superstition. There's a way of understanding the utility of using a device like this and the real effect it has on you. I mean, if I turn over the cards and ask you to look at your life in this moment as though for the first time through this lens, considering in this case lost opportunities, right? Of course it's going to be valid. That doesn't make it can be an incredibly useful thing to do. My main concern is that at no point do you have to lie to yourself about your state of knowledge about the mechanism, right? You don't have to believe tarot cards really work.
There's deeper mechanisms at work with someone who's actually good at that. And so I agree with what you've said.
But they need not be supernatural.
No, I don't think they are supernatural. In fact, I think what happens when you use a projective technique like that, because that's essentially what it is, if I'm good at interpersonal attunement and I'm quite intuitive, what I'm going to do, and everyone does this in the course of a dialogue that's actually working well. I'm going to flip over the cards and I'm going to start with generic archetypal statements that are true in some sense for everyone. But then I'm going to watch you both consciously and implicitly, unconsciously, with all of my social intelligence, and I'm going to see through very, very subtle signs on your part when you respond positively to what I'm saying and when you respond negatively. And I'm going to continue down the lines that you established by your positive responses.
Yeah, but that's what Darren Brown does. He's a mentalist.
Right, well, it's exactly what happens when children are interviewed, for example, by people who lead them as witnesses, right? The children infer from the emotional expressions of the person who's interrogating them what it is that they actually want to hear.
And so they'll even work with that horse, clever Hans.
Exactly, right. That's right, exactly. Yes. Even horses can do this. So tarot card readers can definitely do this. Yes. So the mechanisms behind something like that, even if it appears entirely superstitious on the surface, are often deeper than is revealed at first approximation. So, and I wanted to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, for a minute about rationality, because we've already agreed, I think, and definitely stop me if I'm wrong, that there has to be an intermediary mechanism between the world of facts and the world of values. And well, since we've talked, I've been reading a variety of commentaries on Immanuel Kant. Mostly these have been written by Roger Scruton, by the way. And this is actually the issue that Kant obsessed about for most of his philosophical life. And what he concluded was that empiricism can't be right and rationality can't be right as philosophical disciplines because you need an intermediary structure, and that we have an inbuilt intermediary structure. And that structure is what mediates between the thing in itself, the world of facts, let's say, and the outputs, the values. So then I was thinking,
the truth is we don't quite agree on this. I mean, in my summary of your view of me, I would have agreed with that. But for me, it's just facts all the way down.
Okay,
You're describing more facts.
Glad to hear it, man.
Yeah.
Why do you need a brain then?
Well, a brain is yet another part of reality. I mean, what I mean by a fact
what
is
does it do?
Anything
if the
that
facts
is the
are
case.
just there, what does the brain do? It has to do something because otherwise you don't need it.
Oh, well, sure, it does a lot,
okay.
But your concern to jump to where I think we're going in this conversation is how is it that values can be another order of fact? That seems problematic to you. It seems problematic. It seems problematic to David Hume.
Well, it's problematic for me for a technical reason, which is that in order to act, and we see if we agree on this, in order to perceive and to act, which I believe are both acts of value. To perceive is an act of value because you have to look at something instead of a bunch of other things. So you elevate the thing that you're perceiving to the position of highest value by perceiving it, by deciding to perceive it. So it's an act of value.
That gets translated in my brain into just more facts. You're just giving me the facts of human perception.
Well, okay, that's fine. That's no problem. Right. I'm perfectly happy about that. And then in order to act, you have to select the target of action from among an infinite number, near infinite number, close enough of possible mechanisms of action. And so what a biological organism does is take the facts and translate them into perception and action. And the only organisms that do that with one-to-one mapping are organisms that are composed of sensory motor cells, like sponges, marine sponges, which are composed of sensory motor cells. They don't have an intermediary nervous system. So what they do is they sit in the water and they make a sponge. They're so simple that if you grind a sponge through a sieve in salt water, it'll reorganize itself into the sponge. So that's quite cool. And the sponge sits in the water.
Don't do that at home.
And what it does, and what it does is, there's waves on it, and so those are patterns. And then the sponge opens and closes pores on its surface in response to those patterns. So it maps the pattern of the waves right onto its behavior with no intermediary of a nervous system. But it can only map waves, that's all it can do, and it can only open and close pores. That's it. So it does one-to-one fact-to-value mapping. Now what happens is that as the complexity of a biological organism increases, two things happen. The first thing that happens is that the sensory and motor cells differentiate. So now the organism has sensory cells and motor cells. So senses to detect and cells to detect and cells to act. Okay, so then it can detect more patterns because it's more sophisticated at the sensory perspective, and it can do more things because it has specialized motor systems. But then what happens is that as it gets even more complex, then it puts an intermediary structure of nervous tissue in there, and that structure increases in the number of layers of neurons. And what that means is that as that happens, and as the sensory cells become more specialized, and as the motor output cells become more specialized, many more patterns can be detected. Those are roughly equivalent to facts. And many more motor outputs can be manifested. But a tremendous number of calculations has to occur in that intermediary nervous tissue. And that's the structure that I'm talking about. That structure exists, and it translates the patterns into motor output. And it doesn't do it on a one-to-one basis because there are more patterns, more facts, than there are motor outputs. So what has to happen is this tremendous plethora of facts that surrounds us has to be filtered to the point where you pick a single action, because you can't act otherwise. And so the mechanism that reduces the number of facts to the selected action is the mechanism that mediates between facts and values. And it's not simply in and of itself, it's a fact that that exists, but it isn't a simple, that what it does isn't a simple fact. You can't explain it. You can't understand it.
Why not? Why not? Why isn't that a fact?
For the same reason that you can't.
I mean,
Look, for the same reason that you don't know what a neural network is doing. Like you can train a neural network, an AI neural network.
There's a distinction between facts and facts that we know, right? There is whatever it is the case, right? And then there's our understanding of it and our misunderstanding of it. So there are many things that we think we know that we're wrong about. There are many things that we are aware we're ignorant of, and there's always this larger space of reality that we're struggling to engage with. And it may in fact be the case that in evolutionary terms, I mean, we know it's the case that we have not evolved to understand reality at large perfectly. That's not the sort of monkeys we are, right? And you could even argue that one cognitive scientist who some of you may have heard of, Donald Hoffman, is arguing now, very colorfully, that human consciousness or the human mind is actually evolved to get things wrong in fairly specific ways, so as to maximize survival, and that
was the argument I made in our first discussion.
No, but here, no, it was not quite, because this still preserves the difference between getting things right and getting things wrong. His argument is that getting things truly right, having a nervous system and a cognitive architecture that could really understand reality, quote, reality as it is, would be maladaptive. And he has some mathematical demonstration of this, that the quote true representations of reality are categorically maladaptive, and that there's a certain kind of error that is, and I'm not sure I buy this argument, but the fact that you can make this argument, the fact that you can differentiate the adaptively useful misunderstandings versus a true understanding that's maladaptive, the fact that we can even talk about that demonstrates to me that we have this larger picture of what is in fact true, whether we know it or not. And this is what religion gets so catastrophically wrong.